Good morning, everyone. How are you? Day 2. Some of you are joining us for the first time, but for those of you who were here yesterday, wow, wasn't that, it was amazing. It was really amazing. So welcome back to the second and final day of our inaugural Belonging Symposium here at the Toledo Museum of Art. For those who didn't meet us yesterday, I'm Rhonda Sewell, co-project lead Libby, and on behalf of our entire team, I want to thank you for joining us again. Or if you're just joining us today, welcome to what promises to be another inspiring and engaging and energizing experience. First, I want to take a moment to reflect on yesterday. For those of you who were with us, you know it was truly a powerful day. And for those just arriving, let me say, you're stepping into something really special. We kicked off on Thursday evening at the beautiful Toll House, and what a kickoff it was. Yesterday's sessions continued the momentum with a fiery day of speeches and learning. We explored the concept of merit-based hiring, what it really means, and how to practice it fairly. We heard from a passionate speaker who reminded us that real change starts from within, that before we expect our organizations to change, we must first take a look inward and commit personally to being agents of transformation. We learned how to better serve communities, from our vibrant youth to our honored populations of those who are 60 and better. We talked about reaching those often overlooked and how belonging can help us bridge the gaps. We also shared some of the Toledo Museum of Art's own best practices, highlighting how belonging is not just a philosophy here, it's really a strategic framework. It's part of our value system. We discovered that accessibility is about so much more than ramps and elevators. It's about mindset, culture, and true openness. And perhaps most moving of all, we heard from a courageous, vulnerable panel, individuals who shared personal stories of struggle and triumph, and who showed us that belonging is a pathway to wholeness, to humanity, and ultimately to hope. Throughout the day, we also explored how the broader arts and culture field is approaching belonging with best practices and examples from museums across the country. Beyond the conversations, you participated in activities meant to nourish both heart and mind. You toured our galleries to experience the Glass City's rich artistic history. You contributed to anti-racism and wellness collages, crafting reflections of hope and resistance. And you heard from a local artist who gave a soul-stirring gallery talk about how art quite literally saved his life, transforming him from a troubled youth into an artist whose murals now beautify the entire city of Toledo. We hope you walked away yesterday feeling energized, challenged, and equipped with new ideas that you can bring back to your own organizations, your own work, your communities, and your own life. Today, we keep the momentum going. We'll take a special journey to our sister museum, the Detroit Institute of Arts, just a short ride away, to show you another level of the Midwest's incredible arts and culture landscape. Okay. And this morning, we are thrilled to introduce to you to two powerful speakers who explore the intersection of technology and belonging, a topic that's more relevant now than ever before. We want to thank you again for being part of this inaugural Belonging Symposium. Your energy, your openness, and your ideas have made this experience richer for all of us. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Libby up because I think that she wants to thank a lot of people, sponsors, Faith Goodman, and all of those who have been with us today. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Best job in the world is mine right now because I get to thank all of the incredible people that made this symposium possible. So one more time, and although we're saying it in our hearts all the time, we want to thank our incredible sponsor, Shoemaker, who made this event possible, Lehman Maupin, Destination Toledo, of course the Toledo Museum of Art, our board and leadership who kept this important topic going even through difficult and controversial times. It was important that we continued forward with belonging as a topic for the symposium and that we stay committed to our roots in DEAI. With that, I want to thank every member of this team, everyone here at the Glass Salon, every member of Visitor Services and Protective Services, my co-lead, Rhonda Sewell. If I didn't mention you, I'm truly thankful for every single person who participated and supported this incredible event. And as well, we want to thank our wonderful IT department who is helping us to live stream this event. Even though we have a smaller attendance number here today, we say hello to everyone that we are live streaming towards and who will be viewing this later on as a recorded video online. And with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Rhonda. Thank you.
Next, I want to present to you our first presenter. I want to give you just a little backstory about this wonderful, wonderful, brilliant mind. We met first, Adam and I and two board members, one from our local board and one from our international board, traveled to Lagos, Nigeria in November. And we attended what is called Art X Lagos, Art X Lagos. And it is an annual event of artists from all across Africa, but primarily Nigeria. And it's just an amazing, amazing gathering. We also acquired some art because we're trying to grow our African collections here. So that was a really fun process that as a non-museum person, I got to engage in. And then we were there for an opening of a new West African art museum there that featured more than 300 people from around the world to look at what was a soft launch of this museum. And Adam said, hey, we're going to go over to the person who is really at the head of this new museum, and we're going to go over and meet them and talk to them a little bit. And he goes, and it's a fabulous apartment. So I said, okay, I love architecture. I love interior design. I'm all into it. And then I saw the most stunning person that I've probably ever seen and the most brilliant mind ever. And we all got into this conversation, some deep, deep thought. You love it when you're around people that you can do some intellectual sparring with and have exchange of minds. And that's what she and my director did. And I said, I just adore her. She's the most brilliant person I've ever met. And then, of course, we exchange IG and we look, and I said, I want to say she's a badass. They still can hear me. I'm so stupid. Like, what did that whisper mean, right? But she really is. She has worked for so many companies, Facebook, Meta in Africa, OpenAI, and now she's with Dr. Martens as Chief of Staff to the CEO. You will hear from her and her presentation on really that intersection between belonging and a little bit about her personal story. So Abella Okobi, she's a tech executive, a venture capitalist, and a brand strategist. She is chief of staff, as I said, to the CEO of Dr. Martens and has previously worked for well-known companies such as Yahoo, Nike, and Ada Ventures, as well as OpenAI and Facebook Meta. Without further ado, Ms. Okobi.
Ron, I'm just going to take you around with me everywhere to introduce me every time. I'm going to lower this because I'm height challenged. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. This is my first time in Toledo, and I just wish I had made it a little bit longer, but I got kids, so maybe next time. Anyway, so I thought I would start by giving you a little bit of an origin story, a little bit of context. Now that I'm in my 50s, I have the privilege of having a lot of mentees. And one of the first things that I tell them is that as young people, they will be bombarded with advice and opinions and experts of all different levels of actual experience. And that it's useful when taking in that advice or that opinion or claim of expertise that they understand where it's coming from. Because that context is important. That context shapes what you're hearing. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of my context. So today I'm not here as an expert in art or tech, but okay. I have had many experiences that have shaped what I think about that intersection, and I think that being honest about them will help us to have a more meaningful exchange. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So first of all, I was born in the once independent Republic of San Francisco in California to Nigerian parents. My parents left Nigeria as teenagers to attend university. My mother actually started in the UK, then went to the US, whereas my father went straight to the US, where he went to Fairleigh Dickinson, dropped out, then went to Howard in Washington, D.C. They intended, like most Nigerians their age and at that time, to return to Nigeria and use their educations to help build their country. The Biafran War, a conflict that is caused by the colonial grip on Nigeria's oil, intervened. My paternal grandfather was murdered in a particularly cruel event called the Asaba Massacre. My people, the Igbos, were massacred and starved in the millions. As it happens, before that, my maternal grandfather fought for the British during World War II, and like most African soldiers who fought for empire, he died without any recognition of his sacrifice. My maternal grandmother, however, was an organizer of the Aba Market Women's Rebellion against colonial rule. Because of them, justice is my mission and joy is my birthright. Because of them, I stand on their shoulders, and I owe it to them to live a life in service. Joy, for me, is inextricably linked and connected to being aligned with mission and purpose. And my mission and purpose are themselves linked, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, to bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice. So joy and justice drive me. As for art, I still remember falling in love with art in Mr. Cruz's class when I was 10 years old. Senor Ramiro Cruz was my English teacher, and he could only have existed in the 70s and 80s in San Francisco. He was rumored to have been a member of the Chicano liberation movement, and he would speak to us as 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds about communism, about Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and class struggle. He taught us in public junior high school English class, again, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, the word dogma. And he told us to challenge it anytime we saw it, even if it came from him. He introduced us, again, to Diego, to Frida Kahlo, to art in service of justice, to the realization that as California settlers, we were living on stolen land and borrowed time. He pulled us from class, again, 80s in San Francisco, and he would take us on field trips to museums and galleries and to murals across San Francisco. He'd ask us questions about the work that made us, a class full of wiggly 10 and 11-year-olds, feel that our ideas really mattered. He gave a class of children of immigrants the gift of respect, of courage, and beauty. Since then, I've had a few dalliances. Caravaggio's chaotically beautiful, brutally vulgar work still moves me, even though sometimes he's peak problematic. But I've always come back to loving art as liberatory practice, as a vehicle for telling the stories of the overlooked and unheard, as a way to alchemize broken hearts, as a way to wrest joy from ashes. This is a very roundabout, lots of words, way of saying that I believe so strongly that art matters. Art allows so many of us to bear the world as it is. Art gives us the radical imagination to dream the world as it should be. Since then, I've had the amazing privilege of being a supporter and #1 fan of arts and arts institutions, from chairing the development board of the Young Vic Theatre to chairing the patrons board of the UK Pavilion for the 2024 Venice Biennale to support the phenomenal work of John Akomfra, to serving as a trustee of the Whitechapel Gallery, to chairing the development board of the Museum of West African Art, which is how I met Rhonda and Adam. I am, alas, not an artist, though I'm pretty proud of myself for handcrafting human beings. Anyway, but like probably few of you here, I'm so clear on how important art and storytelling is, especially in the moment in which we find ourselves. And I've decided that part of my life work must be creating places of care and joy and freedom for artists and creating beloved community for artists and institutions. So that's how I came to art. So how did I come to tech? Well, I started in tech in 2008, and what drew me initially was Google's Don't Be Evil. Do you guys remember that? Well as what it felt very much like there is a role of a lifetime, building and leading the very first ever human rights team at a tech company at Yahoo. Y'all remember Yahoo? I don't know if that's still a thing. In any event, I'm still not a tech person. I'd never played video games that I made myself on my old Commodore 64, or whatever that is. I'd never built anything in a garage. I still don't play video games. I don't understand them. But in 2008, I saw a job listing that miraculously combined all of my weird life experiences into a job description. They wanted global experience, civil society experience, recovering lawyer, escaped lawyer, policy, experience working for a company, outsized idealism, willingness to travel, insufficient boundaries between work and life, all those things. Anyway, it felt like fate. So I became the global head and senior legal director of business and human rights at Yahoo, and my whole job was aligning company decisions with the United Declarations of Human Rights. It wasn't public relations or marketing, it was real. It was a cross-functional team that actually advised the entire company, from the CEO and the board of directors to policy teams, product teams, on human rights risks and responsibilities. We learned directly from human rights defenders around the world, from journalists and academics about difficult questions, and we unfailingly tried to do the right thing even when it was hard. After almost 7 years at Yahoo, I went to Facebook, where I spent almost 8 years. I built the Africa, Middle East, and Turkey policy team, which meant that our job was to understand the socio-political landscape across Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey, to engage with heads of state, with ministers, regulators, to help shape policy and identify risk related to every issue that intersected with Facebook as a company. Since by then, billions of people around the world had so much of their lives connected to and dominated by Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, it meant that the issues that we dealt with range from child exploitation of content to how the company should compensate news agencies for surfacing news, to the company's responsibility for hollowing out democracy, fomenting violence, and facilitating genocide. Most people in that role are expected to shape policy to the needs of the company, but I never thought that that was right. I never thought it was right that a company with no democratic role in a country could shape policy that would govern the lives of citizens. So our whole team saw our number one role as preventing and mitigating harm from our platforms, and as protecting the space for free expression and local voice, and the ability for people to speak truth to power. I also spent time, most recently, at OpenAI, which is where I was when I met Adam and Rhonda last year. Between OpenAI and Facebook, I'd also taken a sabbatical, during which I really got to immerse myself in art and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I started at OpenAI in April of last year. I worked on initial policy for Africa and spent time with the team that was helping to work with artists and creators. I left OpenAI in January of this year, and candidly, I left tech quite deliberately for what I hope will be, not to sound dramatic, the rest of my life, as in forever. OpenAI, my experience in the land of AI hype. I think especially after having seen 2 different hype cycles and being responsible for what happens after a company moves fast and breaks things, it's crystallized my views on art and AI. So I thought it was important for you to know this is what's shaping my views. It doesn't mean that it's everyone else's views or that I'm an expert, but it is these experiences that lead me to what I think now. I'm someone who cares very deeply about art, artists, the joy of being challenged and astounded by the way Kendrick Lamar or Langston Hughes writes a phrase, or a beautifully told story, the sound of drums, the way that John Akamfa tells stories about struggle. I'm also someone who spent just under 2 decades accidentally in tech, but mostly as a ghost in the machine. Are there any tech nerds who get the reference, ghost in the machine? for those who don't. So Ghost in the Machine as a term began as a philosophical term, originally used to describe and critique the concept of mind existing alongside and separate from the body. In the context of contemporary nerd fiction, and I say that with love, it describes an emergent consciousness residing in a computer. And I use this term on purpose because I entered tech because I was aware of its power and of the pitfalls of unchecked power. But I really believe that for the most part, there was a collective interest in doing the right thing. But the longer I stayed in tech, and especially in the borderline cult of AI, the more I felt like an emergent consciousness and conscience inside the machine, but at odds with the machine. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that we're clear, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. And I owe all of the following to thinkers and scientists and friends and engineers and researchers, including Emil Torres, Timnit Gebru, etc. Artificial intelligence is essentially a marketing term at this point. It means everything from autonomous weapons to QR codes to large language models like OpenAI's ChatGPT. The latter, large language models, is what is primarily driving the conversation now. And typically, when we're talking about art and AI, we're generally talking about large language models and generative AI and the multiple applications that derive from them. What are large language models? Does anyone know what they are? Okay. So large language models are a type of machine learning model. It's designed for natural language processing, such as natural language processing tasks such as language generation. So essentially, to try to simplify it, you have these programs that are basically trained on massive amounts of data, trillions and trillions and trillions of pieces of data. And it's a bit like a statistical prediction machine. So it's not reading or understanding or learning, it's essentially predicting what comes next. That's what large language models are. The question that I have learned to ask with regard to new technology, but really I have found it useful with anything that starts being described as inevitable, is whom does this serve? Or who's served by this? We'll come back to this question. When I started OpenAI, after having been out of tech for 2 years, remember I took a sabbatical, best thing I ever did, I must admit to having known very little about AI. More than a year later, candidly, I don't really know that much more, but my time in the machine made it clear that almost no one, even there, knew that much. Inside the companies, inside the spaces in which policies to regulate the impact of those companies, in spaces that will be enormously affected by those companies, so many of us are making it up as we go along. What I did learn after I was in was the origin of large language models. Has anyone here heard of the acronym TESC-REAL? Yeah, neither had I. Well, or TESC-REALism. It's an acronym created by a researcher to describe the bundle of ideologies that animate what we now call AI. It stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. That is so many words, many of which I candidly did not know and still kind of don't believe are real words. People have written entire tomes on this, so I'm not going to bore you with it. So I can't hope to explain all of them in detail that they deserve, but I do think it's important to give an overview because these terms are the foundation, the root, the animating forces behind the technology that is being driven almost relentlessly into our lives. So before I get to these words, it's important to collectively understand the goal of the companies or the research organizations that started the AI race. Specifically, OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic were all founded with the goal to create artificial general intelligence. How many of you have heard of that? Okay, so that's why they were created. They weren't created to make it so that you could make cute memes of like yourself in a box. They were actually created to find artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is an all-knowing, all-powerful entity capable of solving all of our problems and creating utopia. This sounds silly, but it's actually a fact. At the heart of TESC-REALism is a techno-utopian vision of the future. This vision is predicated upon a belief that technology will enable humanity to, amongst other miracles, produce radical abundance, re-engineer ourselves, become immortal, we'll come back to that, colonize the universe, let's come back to that, and create a massive post-human civilization in space that will be full of trillions and trillions of people. The most obvious way is to realize this utopia is by building super intelligent AGI. Are you with me? Okay, good. I wasn't with myself when I first heard this. You gotta stay with me because it's gonna get wackier, and if you don't follow along, you'll get lost. Okay, so let's break down the acronym, TESCREAL. T is for transhumanism. The core vision of transhumanism is to technologically re-engineer the human species to create a superior new race of post-humans. These post-humans would be superior because of superhuman abilities, like, for example, immortality, extremely high IQs, total control over their emotions, exceptional rationality. I think it's interesting to think about those definitions of superiority. Where could they come from? Whom might they exclude? Whom might they favor? Let's take a pin. Tech is obsessed with this. Elon Musk's company, I'm sorry, y'all didn't boo when you heard Elon Musk? Anyway, Elon Musk's company, one of them, Neuralink's mission is to merge your brain with AI, which it claims will jumpstart the next stage of human evolution. That's a quote. Sam Altman, one of the founders and the current CEO of OpenAI, has donated hundreds of millions to a longevity startup with the plan to prolong human life, but only some humans. And he's also signed up with a company called Nectome, a company that preserves brains so that one day they can be uploaded to a computer. It requires you to be murdered before that happens, but we're working on the technology. He also secretly donated $180 million to another longevity startup called Retro Biosciences, which aims to prolong human life by discovering how to rejuvenate our bodies. All of this is animated by the vision to select for the most superior humans to make them even more superior. If that sounds to you like eugenics, you are correct. The core philosophies of TESCREAL are grounded in explicit concern about less intelligent people outbreeding more intelligent people. The pervasive concern is that if unintelligent people have too many children, then the average intelligence level of humanity will decrease, thus jeopardizing the whole project. Next three are extropianism. Extropianism has been kind of debunked because it's flowed into the next one, but basically it's a philosophy that advocates for the continuous improvement of the human condition through technological and scientific advances. The next one is singularitarianism. It refers to the singularity. Has anyone ever heard of the singularity? Yeah. I want to be the internet, yeah. Yeah, of course, right. So there's the singularity, which I actually thought was just something that was in movies. It is not. It's the moment when technological development exceeds our comprehension, perhaps driven by an intelligence explosion of self-improving AI. The singularity in this world will create this techno-utopian future, plus a state of radical post-scarcity abundance. The singularity, as described by many in the AI space, will enable our post-human digital descendants to colonize, there's that word again, and dominate the universe. Cosmism, that's the C in TESCREAL, is the belief that these superior humans will merge with technology, which will result in, I quote, a new phase of the evolution of our species. Eventually, these superior and evolved humans will develop sentient AI and mind-uploading technology that will allow those superior beings, just them, to live forever, essentially as blends of man and machine. Many of these uploaded minds will choose to live in virtual worlds. So those of you who watched The Matrix, remember that? But this is being posited as a utopia. I think in The Matrix it was considered a bad thing, but in this world it's considered awesome. So, still with me? Yeah. Okay. I think it's important to recognize the implications of those beliefs, to recognize how those beliefs are showing up in policy, in conversations about tech, in the behaviors of those who are leading the conversations about tech. We'll talk about them, but for now, again, stick a pin. R is for rationalism, so that's finding ways to enhance our rationality. In the tech utopian space, which at the moment is almost all of it, rationality means putting aside emotions, which are considered to cloud one's good judgment, and searching for the most rational solutions. For example, one of the most cited leaders in the AI space claimed, based upon what he characterized as mathematically rational logic, that it would be better to let one person be horribly tortured for 50 years without hope or rest than to allow a very large number of people to experience the nearly imperceptible discomfort of having an eyelash in their eye. He posited this as a thought experiment, but to prove that these types of decisions can be made mathematically. EA stands for effective altruism. This is meant to optimize morality using rational thought. EAs argue, for example, that if you use rationality and logic and numbers, you will find that you can do more for more overall good in the world if you choose, for example, to work for an evil organization, say, for example, a weapons manufacturer, and make a lot of money. Because if you donate that extra income, that will be more overall good than if you took a job making less money for a good cause. Sam Bankman-Fried, I don't know if you guys remember him, the former darling of cryptocurrency, lauded as the CEO of a generation, the founder of the largest cryptocurrency company in the world at one time, who faced 155 years in prison after being convicted of massive fraud. He was a major proponent of EA. L, we're at the end, stands for long-termism. Long-termism posits that humanity can theoretically exist on Earth for another 1 billion years. On top of that, they say that if we colonize space, humanity could live on for a number that I cannot pronounce, but it is a 1 followed by 40 zeros. I don't know what that number is, but that's the number that's given. Further, because of transhumanism, remember the superior people who are melded with computers? Because of that, if the superior humans are futurely melded with computers into vast computer simulations, spread throughout the cosmos, because Earth's space would have been colonized, then it follows that the more people who exist in this utopia, then the more overall happiness. So if you remember our lesson about rationality, if this utopian future will result in potentially trillions of humans living in a computer-aided utopian life, then, according to the philosophy, it makes rational sense to maximize the potential of that utopian future, even if it means, in the short term, destroying the potential futures of the people whose descendants would not be part of that optimized utopia. Because there would be more happiness far, far away, it's okay to sacrifice the people now, if you think about it from a very rational point of view. To make that clearer, for example, there are about 1.3 billion people living in multidimensional poverty today. There are hundreds of millions of people who are victims of genocide, war, displacement, billions who will feel the brunt of this man-made climate crisis, which is being exacerbated by tech. All of those billions, however, according to this bundle of philosophies that are driving tech, do not matter when weighed rationally and scientifically against the future many, many trillions of lives that could exist in this utopian future. As such, the rational decision is to maximize for those lives, not the billions now, not our current planet. One of the leading thinkers, McCaskill, for example, argues in his 2022 book, What We Owe the Future, that in order to keep the engines of economic growth roaring, we should consider replacing human workers with digital workers. So now that you know what TaskReal means, when I was going through it, some of it sounded silly, right? Pieces of it. I think you could dismiss it as ridiculous if it weren't clear that it is a powerful ideology, not only across tech, which has become the richest, the most pervasive, the most inescapable sector of each of our lives. Some of the most influential people in the AI space, from OpenAI to Anthropic to DeepMind, are adherents to this bundle of philosophies. We could afford to ignore it, we could afford to laugh at it, if it were not clear that politically its proponents are making policy decisions about space exploration, about resource allocation, about which lives are valuable, when policymakers and our political leaders know little about these ideologies. So back to art and AI. The African-American writer Toni Cade Bambara said that as a culture worker, an artist who belongs to oppressed people, my job is to make revolution irresistible. If you'll remember, I started this talk maybe 1,000 years ago, I hope it doesn't feel that long, talking about why I think art is important. If the purpose of art is to make revolution irresistible, if the purpose of art is to preserve stories and culture, to amplify voices, to speak truth to power, to celebrate the messy, beautiful, terrifying reality of being human, how does that square with the worldview that sees humans as disposable, as replaceable, and which extols supremacist and anti-indigenous ideologies? How does it square with a worldview that relegates art to content, and artists as interchangeable and easily replaceable content creators? To make it concrete, how many of you saw or participated in that cute thing that went viral where you can get a doll made of yourself or someone you love using your features and interests? How many of you saw that? Okay, good. It was something that went across Instagram. And how many of you have used any other text to image AI? Has anyone used any text to image AI models where you type in text? You can enter text and it will generate an image, as in the doll that looks like you. It's sometimes a silly or a fun image, but more and more, these tools are being used to generate what is referred to as art or to generate realistic images. But it raises so many questions. Those images are generated because the models have been trained on billions of images, including the unattributed work of artists. In many of those models, you can input the name of an artist and ask it to generate something in the style of that artist. What are the ethical implications of this? What does it mean with regard to ownership? What does it mean if the company worth paper billions, made profitable because it uses work without compensation or credit, and answerable to no one but shareholders, and if they haven't gone public, it's not a public shareholders, what happens when that company renders artists replaceable? Now that you know a bit about the genesis of these companies and the animating philosophies, do you think that these outcomes and these outcomes of erasure are a feature or a bug? In other words, does an outcome of putting current humans out of work align with any of the philosophies that I have described? There are also issues related to ethics. As someone who's been in tech again since 2008, especially in policy, I can tell you that it always ends up being porn at some point, and usually as early as possible. Regardless of your views on whether images of sex and sexuality are good or bad, there's a mostly collectively shared view that images of children being sexually assaulted are wrong. With these technologies, people can and do create images of children being sexually assaulted. They can even be created with images of known children. If a company unleashes that technology on the world, what can or should be done about it as a community? How should it be held responsible? What about fakes? People have giggled at images of, say, heads of state inserted into hilarious images. Like I think a year ago there was Trump on the head, he has the Trump head on the Nevermind baby, it was cute. But what about creating videos in which a woman candidate for office is placed into a sex tape? Or a video created to depict a crime that someone is then found culpable for? What about the fact that these models are trained on art content that is available? As such, they reflect the biases of those whose work, words, art, and content dominate the online space. Why is that a bad thing? I just watched the Ryan Coogler movie, Sinners. Has anyone else seen it? Okay, I'm about to see it again tomorrow. It is, if you haven't seen it, it is astonishing. I hate horror movies. I refuse to see vampire movies. In fact, I have never ever seen one in my life until this one. But what he made is one of the most beautiful pieces of art I have ever had the privilege of seeing. What he's done, which I have never seen done at this level, is tell in a beautifully, emotionally complex story that fully addresses so many themes. It's not a spoiler, these aren't spoilers, I'm just doing an overview, and gives absolutely no quarter with regard to talking about Black rage, the ways in which white supremacy is an existential threat to everything beautiful in the world, the moral and creative bankruptcy of extractive vulture capitalism, the way America seems to desperately need the blood and bodies and souls of colored folk and hates us for that need, the healing power of Black love and beloved community, the need to guard solidarity with our lives, the ways that art and creativity are our strength. Fela, so I'm Nigerian, so I'm a big Fela fan, once saying, music is the weapon. that movie very much talked about music being the weapon, and the way the power of our creativity is stolen and commoditized to make it a weapon against us instead of for us. I could go on and on. You talk to me later about it, but y'all just go see it. It's incredible. As I said, I'm from the Bay Area, sidebar. And I also love that when Ryan Coogler is interviewed, he is the most Oakland dude to ever Oakland. He's not code switching for none of y'all, and I love this for him so much. He's absolutely himself. Anyway, one of the things that bothered me so much about generative AI in the space of art making is this history in the US of wanting the art without the people. Does that make sense? So wearing the feathers and headdresses of indigenous communities while massacring them in the millions and building golf courses on their graves, of turning Big Mama Thornton's hound dog into Elvis's hound dog, paying him millions while erasing her. I could go on, from blues and jazz to R&B to hip hop. There's a hip hop artist named Tobe Nwigwe. He's Nigerian, Igbo, born in Houston. And he has a song that was in the soundtrack, I think, to Black Panther 2. I promise I see other movies than Brian Coogler vehicles, but they just happened to be in that. Anyway, the lyrics are, they want the drip, they want my soul. They want the drip, they want the glow, they want my soul. The argument I'm making is not that certain art forms can only be embraced or performed by certain people. I'm asking a question. If enjoyment of an art form requires erasing the artist, then who benefits? And this is one of the things I find the most disturbing about the intersection of generative AI. It feels like technological vampirism. The ability to extract the life out of makers, cloak oneself in their bodies that have been sucked dry, and to call that progress. Here's another thing. What and who is erased with AI? You think about indigenous stories. You think about the wisdom of ancestors. If it's scraping what's on the internet and you're not on the internet, what does that mean about the new reality that's constructed? Then there is the use of electricity, of water, of natural resources. AI servers could potentially use between 85 and 135 terawatt hours annually, which would consist of about 0.5% of the world's yearly electricity consumption. That's equivalent to the energy consumption of the Netherlands. Each prompt, so whenever you go into OpenAI or wherever and do a prompt, requires at least 4 to 5 times more computing power than a traditional search. Currently, the data centers that power AI models account for roughly 1% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, and that's now. While it's not as intensive as other industries like textiles or transportation, it's a significant contributor to global emissions with expectations of further growth. Data centers and their annual emissions doubled between 2017 and 2020, and this level of growth is expected to accelerate. Due to their massive energy demand, data facilities consume between 10 to 50 times more energy than the average office building. And as demand for bigger and better AI models grow, more data centers will be constructed, resulting in increased emissions and resource strain to meet the computational demand. The training and operation of LLMs also requires massive computational powers, which makes them really, really hot. So to prevent overheating, data centers rely on cooling systems that consume massive amounts of water. For instance, training OpenAI's GPT-3 required about 700,000 liters of water, enough to fill a nuclear reactor's cooling tower. Google's data center, which powers models like Gemini, consumed 5.6 billion gallons of water in 2022, largely for cooling. That's equivalent to the daily water needs of 43,000 households. Every time you interact with an LLM, it consumes even more water. For example, every 10 to 50 prompts to ChatGPT uses roughly 500 milliliters of water, every 10 to 50 prompts. Google Search, which processes 8.5 billion queries daily, uses 10 times more water when it's enhanced by AI. Data centers in hot, dry regions like Arizona or Chile use 40% more water for cooling than those in cooler climates. Microsoft's Arizona data center, for example, uses 56 million liters of water every year, enough to sustain 1,400 families for a whole year. Consider the environmental and social consequences of this. Data centers compete with agriculture and drinking water for very limited resources. In Chile, for example, data centers have been accused of exacerbating water shortages for local farmers. Meanwhile, the energy to power these systems often comes from coal or gas plants, which themselves consume vast amounts of water for cooling. ChatGPT's monthly energy use indirectly consumes million liters of water through power generation alone. Consider the social justice implications of that. Data centers are frequently built in low-income or marginalized areas, creating sacrifice zones, because those communities don't have the resources to protest. In Oregon's Data Center Alley, residents have raised concerns about the environmental and health impacts of nearby facilities. Globally, the water footprint of AI exacerbates inequality, with drought-stricken regions in the global south hosting servers for Western tech firms. Kenya, for example, faces severe water shortages, yet its resources are being diverted to cool machines that serve people in the US and Europe. When these issues are raised, the very common refrain is, well, it's inevitable. It's progress, it's happening, we just have to learn to deal with it. I would encourage us to ask, is it though? Is it inevitable? Or are we making it inevitable by complying in advance? Who benefits from the illusion of inevitability? There are very beautiful and life-affirming uses of technology. They can only happen, however, when we center humans, current humans, not potential future superior human-computer hybrids in a tech utopia, but humans now. They can only happen when the least of us belong, when the least of us are included. Any technology nurtured in a supremacist ideologies will operate exactly as designed in ways that erase. It is a logic of genocide, full stop. If I leave you with nothing else, I hope it's with questions. In other words, I hope you're inspired to learn more about the intersection of art and AI, and to read people like Timnit Gebruik, Ruha, Emil Torres. I hope you will start to always ask, when faced with new technology, whom does this benefit? Who is harmed? What is the cost? What is the true cost? And are there many costs that are being described as externalities or unimportant? And if so, who is defining what is external? Who is defining what is unimportant? I also want us to know that absolutely nothing is inevitable before it happens. So be a ghost in the machine. Be a troublemaker, ask the questions. As institutions, recognize that they need you to make things inevitable. Even in this moment, when institutions are struggling, they still have more power than individual artists. So even in this movement, use that power to convene, use that power to ask questions. We can dream different worlds. If the thought of a future in which trillions of tech-optimized, racially cleansed beings are connected to the matrix and live virtual lives in the spaces devoid of nature sounds like a nightmare to you, then it is important not to give up our collective right to dream and to shape the future to those for whom this hellscape is a utopia. Now is a time for radical imagination.
I don't know about all of you, but my mind is blown right now. What an incredible presentation. Let's give another round of applause for Abile Okobi. That was such an amazing and thought-provoking presentation. She gave us so much to think about. She shared her insights on how technology and AI are not just tools, but really they're forces that are actively shaping our policy. They're redefining belonging and influencing the future of our communities and our institutions. She challenged us to think differently, to understand that belonging in the digital age must be intentional, ethical, and inclusive. Your message today just gave us not only new knowledge, but a call to action to be proactive in creating tech-driven spaces where fairness, representation, and humanity remain at the center. We're so deeply grateful for your presentation today. And just as an aside, I always like to say how Toledo is the center of the universe, like everyone is connected. Ryan Coogler, I saw Sinners twice, but Ryan Coogler's entire family lives here in Toledo, yeah. So when Black Panther first came out, he rented out all the theaters for his family. Many of you may know Fred Coogler, who's a guidance counselor at Scott High School. That's Ryan's uncle, and all his cousins live here and everybody. And I could go on and on. Like Alicia Keys' mother was born here and went to Central Catholic High School. And there's a lot of people from Toledo. I'm like, we are the Matrix. So again, I cannot thank you enough for that mind-blowing. So iRobot is real then, okay? I thought I was going crazy. But it's so much to think about because it's so fast, the technology. It's like yesterday there was Google, today there's, ChatGPT, and some of us are having fun with it, but there's a serious side. So what an incredible presentation. I hope this is not your last time to Toledo. So thank you again, thank you. And she came all the way from London to be with us today. Next, Libby will present our next amazing speaker who is affiliated here with the Toledo Museum of Art, and we want to show you our own best practices. Libby?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rhonda. And before I do that, I have one last round of thank yous, and that is to our amazing presenters who have helped make this event as important and absolutely special. You are only as good as your panel, and so with that, I'm just going to quickly run down the names of the people who have presented with us, but they are Michaela Ayers, and by the way, with Michaela, she also offers this wonderful opportunity to collage online, and there's information on the table right outside. Shameless promotion, why not? Because I can do it there. Roberto Bedoya, Calvin, who you're going to hear from, Burchfiel in just a moment, Mika G. Conway, Katie Shelley, Jessica Mack, Grace Stewart, Maurice Stinnett, Tim Teggy, Faith Goodman by way of presenting her art with us, everyone who presented on our panel, B. Davis, Rodney Eason, Mark Folk, Priya Frank, of course, Dr. Adam Levine, Will Lucas, Chris Chili Rodriguez, Rhonda Sewell, and Abile Kobe, and I hope I didn't just butcher your name. I never forget a face. I tell everyone this, but this is my hurdle in life, trying to get names down. But I never forget all your beautiful faces, so I suppose that's a good thing. And with that, it is my great honor to introduce to you someone who is now a permanent part of our TMA staff. I'm pleased to say he and his family have relocated to Toledo by way of Texas and Japan. Calvin Burchfield is an innovative technology leader and a driving force behind TMA Labs at the Toledo Museum of Art. He's dedicated to art, tech, community, and has spearheaded groundbreaking projects integrating blockchain and digital collaboration into museum spaces. One of my favorite things about Calvin is how relatable and able he is to talk to those of us who are not as well versed in this field in a way that we can actually grasp and understand, because we know that he's way up here. Some of us are still way down here, but trying desperately to learn. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Calvin Burchfield. Calvin.
Hello. The mic is, I don't have to hold it to my face. That's really nice. Before I get started, really, really lovely presentation right before mine. I was just thinking, like, we can kind of end it there. I don't think we need the rest of this.
There is a handheld mic right here.
Oh, is there? Okay. It's good to know for later. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, anyway, point being, please lower your expectations drastically. I also really loved the Ghost in the Machine reference. My handle online is Ghost in the Museum. And as someone kind of in the middle space between tech and art, I kind of feel like a ghost in both worlds. Wherever I end up, I kind of feel like, should I really be here? Am I allowed to be here? So very relatable. Your talk reminded me a lot of a conversation I was having last night about a genre that I really love called cyberpunk. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that genre or not, but I think it's becoming more and more relevant, and especially hearing your talk, it's like, wow, that's exactly cyberpunk. But the way I described it last night was cyberpunk is a reaction to the inevitable tech dystopia we are potentially hurtling towards. Sounds really awful. But cyberpunk is about subverting technology to kind of counteract those forces and to carve out space for yourself in a world that maybe is overwhelmingly oppressive. So I think it's kind of relevant to the moment that we're in, the one that we're potentially going towards, and if things are at least partially inevitable, then there might be some sort of strategies there that we can use going forward. But anyway, so I'm Calvin. As was mentioned before, I help lead digital transformation at the Toledo Museum of Art through TMA Labs, which is a group created to experiment at the intersection of art, technology, and community. So I'll just get into it from now. So I was invited to talk about best practices in technology experimentation based on the work we've done in our Digital Artist in Residency program. First, I'll begin with why technology is relevant to what we're doing here. Then I'll go through some of our experiments that we've done so far, and then finally with thoughts on the future. You can scan this QR code if you'd like to connect with me. It'll be at the end as well. I'm always happy to go into things online. That's kind of where I live anyway. So if there's anything you want to ask questions about, or if you want to challenge anything that I've said, please connect with me. I'd love to chat. But anyway, jump right into it. Let's see. So we live in an unfair world. We heard a lot about it earlier. Institutions, whether culturally, governmental, or economic, were not built to support everyone equally. They were shaped by power, who had access, and who was allowed to belong. Across history, we've seen the erasure of cultures, the rewriting of narratives, and the exclusion of voices that should have been heard. Art is a way for people to assert their existence, that they matter, that their stories deserve to be remembered. Art is often controlled by systems that dictate who can create, be seen, and be valued. Technology opens up new doors for expression and connection, but it also creates issues. Social media extends our networks, but also forces artwork into monotonous formats, the Instagram square, for instance, creates performative echo chambers, and divides us algorithmically. We're starting to see the impacts of Web3, AI, 3D printing, extended reality as a part of a complex and rapidly changing reality. For all its flaws, technology has allowed people to create spaces for themselves where none existed before. We have seen artists and communities break past barriers of language, geography, and systemic exclusion to find each other and build something new. Artists who, under traditional systems, would have been denied access because of their location, who they are, their class, their financial situation, have used technology to stake their claim in the world. If our mission is to support art, to preserve cultural memory, to create spaces of belonging, then we must actively engage with the shifts that are reshaping creative expression and community building. We must ask, how can we use these tools to showcase culture and shape the systems around it? We're gathered here in an architectural marvel, really beautiful building, surrounded by some of the greatest artwork ever produced. Is there a digital equivalent to this? Should there be? And if there should, can we build it? So who will we be? As individuals, institutions, or as a society, this is a key question. Technology is advancing at an accelerating pace. We can try to ignore the chaos. We can blanket ourselves in nostalgia. Museums being a perfect place for that. We're filled with thousands of years of nostalgia. And pretend that the world isn't changing. Or we can change with it and change it. Change comes with both promise and peril, but refusing to act often leads to stagnation, irrelevance, and destruction. We're living in an era of transformation not seen since the Renaissance. A new world is emerging. We imagine museums as above the fray, but museums aren't inherently neutral. They shape the narrative of what art is, what belongs, and what should be preserved. We're at the threshold of a new digital world constructed from imagination, technology, and willpower. The choice before us is simple. Do we shape this world, or do we allow others to do it for us? If we refuse, others will, and when we finally join the new world, we may find that we don't have a place there. The art world orbits historical power centers in New York, London, Paris, some other places. The influence of these cities determines what gets seen, celebrated, and remembered, and erased. A 2018 study by Magnus Reich and colleagues analyzing nearly 500,000 artists found proximity to these hubs in the first 5 exhibitions a strong predictor of long-term success. If you're not there, not wealthy, not connected, or not fluent in the language, you're likely shut out from the start. But as with all rigid systems, cracks eventually form. Artists are finding new ways in, sometimes through institutions, although often without them. Social media was the start, but came with its own trade-offs, algorithms, commodification, and performative visibility. Now technologies like Web3 and AR are presenting new questions. Web3 offers a vision of decentralization, direct sales, digital ownership, and borderless communities. And in many ways, it works. Artists from Lagos to Sao Paulo are building global collector bases. But that same decentralization also creates new barriers, favoring early adopters, coders, and those who can afford financial risks. The dream collides with speculation, privilege, and new kinds of gatekeeping. Is this an art world for crypto bros? The stereotype of the crypto bro doesn't fully reflect who's using Web3. According to a Cradle study, cryptocurrency adoption is highest in regions of political and economic instability. In the US, Black Americans are among the most active users due to lack of access, security, and ownership in traditional systems. Outside of the US, people who are unbanked, who lack access to stable currencies or institutions, are making use of Web3 in ways that we can't truly understand. As privileged citizens of a developed nation with the world's most dominant currency, it's easy for us to miss the value on a global scale. Many early adopters started using the technology out of necessity or due to frustration with the systems that we take for granted. If we dismiss these tools outright, we're ignoring a movement of artists actively reclaiming their visibility, autonomy, and future. That is something we can't afford to overlook. If Web3 challenges how art is funded, documented, and distributed, AI challenges how it can be created and interpreted. It enables new forms of accessibility, empowering those with disabilities, limited resources, or different cognitive styles to make and experience art in unprecedented ways. But it also replicates the blind spots of its data, facial recognition errors, Eurocentric beauty norms, gaps in cultural memory, echoing historical erasures. But AI is probably here to stay and becoming part of a part of our lives every day. We need to learn how to live in an AI world. Artists are often the first to investigate new tools, geographies, and ways of understanding. So I believe that pioneering artists using tools like AI and Web3 are our guides here. And this brings us to our Digital Artist in Residency program. We wanted to explore these tools in context. We asked what happens when artists using Web3 collaborate with an institution. Can we learn when we meet them where they already are? Osinachi grew up in Nigeria with a love of books. His earliest inspirations were not museums or galleries, but secondhand books that transported him to new worlds. Unlike many artists, Osinachi's first medium wasn't paint or charcoal, it was Microsoft Word, a tool he'd intended for writing stories of his own, but one that through experimentation became a canvas. Without formal art training and limited access to institutions, he developed his own distinct practice. For years, Osinachi created in isolation, hoping for a chance to exhibit his work, only to be met with rejection. Traditional institutions weren't ready to embrace bold and challenging art created in Microsoft Word. The blockchain provided what the art world had denied him: access, agency, and direct connection to collectors. He could sell his work without a gallery as an intermediary. By 2021, he became the first African artist to have his work auctioned as an NFT by Christie's. But Osinachi didn't stop at his own success. He saw the potential for other African artists who had been excluded from the traditional art world and launched Africa Here. His work helped bring African digital artists into major exhibitions, including Art Basel Miami. For artists across Nigeria, Africa, and the world, Web3 became an equalizer, a way to be a part of a global conversation. At TMA, we wanted to go beyond simply exhibiting Osinachi's work. We wanted to challenge how we interact with digital art. We paired Osinachi with Toledo-based artist Yusuf Latif, whose work explores race, spirituality, and belonging through mural making, found object assemblages, and community-driven projects. As co-founder of Radiant City Arts and the Toledo Black Artists Coalition, Yusuf has long used art as a tool for social engagement and processing cultural memory. Latif was an ideal collaborator for an artist like Osinachi, who also grapples with themes of identity and transformation. The two artists spent months in conversation and learning. These dialogues became the foundation of their work together, culminating in the Sankofa Carnival, a conceptual framework for the residency. The term Sankofa, derived from the Akan language, is used as an abbreviation for a phrase which translates to, "It's not taboo to go back for what you forgot," a philosophy of reclaiming the past to inform the future. Carnival in many cultures represents transformation, community, and celebration, a space where hierarchies dissolve and new possibilities emerge. Sankofa Carnival embodied the spirit and aspirations of the residency as a catalyst for cultural exchange across the African diaspora. There were two generative art collections created in the residency. The artists incorporated archival images from the museum and Toledo's community, remixing history into algorithmic collage. The fusion of past and present challenged the idea that digital art exists outside of tradition. It became an extension of it. I'm not used to talking this long, I apologize. For Osinachi, the residency also became a chance to push beyond digital media. He experimented with stained glass, adapting his piece, For This Is My Body, a work inspired by the reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. Both the digital and physical versions now exist in TMA's collection as gifts from the artists. Osinachi's foray into physical artwork mirrored Yusuf's translation of a physical painting into the digital art collection. This approach reinforced a critical lesson from the residency. Digital and traditional art are not in competition, they are in conversation. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, with hundreds of artworks distributed as NFTs for free. Visitors were drawn to the visual and thematic depth of the pieces, but many struggled with understanding digital ownership. The biggest question we encountered was, what do I do with this NFT? This highlights an ongoing challenge. How do we make digital ownership feel tangible and valuable to those unfamiliar with it? Ethiopia is one of the world's oldest civilizations, long-standing as a cultural crossroads, a meeting place in Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Home to ancient kingdoms and three of the world's major religions, its legacy is maintained through art, stone, and literature. This history has been safeguarded in manuscripts, scrolls, and paintings that have endured political upheaval, colonization attempts, and natural disasters. Yet, like many cultures, Ethiopia's stories are always at risk, threatened by time, war, and erasure. For Yatreda, preserving Ethiopia's culture and history is an act of stewardship, a way to ensure that these stories endure beyond forces that might erase them. Yatreda is a collective of artists who sees technology as an extension of Ethiopia's long tradition of storytelling. Their work is influenced by a deep, nostalgic longing for the past. Through cinematic black and white moving images, they capture the lives of Ethiopia's kings, warriors, and everyday people, ensuring that their legacies do not fade into obscurity. The blockchain, much like the ancient inscriptions of Ethiopia's past, is a ledger of history. It ensures that the collective's work cannot be altered, erased, or hidden. For Yatreda, blockchain is a safeguard. By placing their work on the blockchain, they are securing their stories in a way that is permanent, censorship-resistant, and accessible to future generations. Unlike physical artifacts that can be stolen, burned, or lost to time, their digital works exist beyond the control of any single institution, company, or regime. In contrast to Yatreda's sweeping historical focus, Jordan Busher explores the deeply personal, based in Toledo. Busher is known for her still life paintings of books, heirlooms, and objects imbued with sentimentality, mystery, and memory. Her work is often rooted in family history and overlooked stories embedded in objects. In her move toward digital, she subtly animated her paintings, introducing movement in ways that reflected the passage of time and the reveal of something hidden. These allowed her to explore the transient nature of memory in a way she had never done before. Her residency became an exploration of contrast, the visible and the hidden, the fleeting and the enduring. the personal and the public. It was an experiment in how artistic practices could evolve in a digital space. In Ethiopian tradition, the coffee ceremony is an act of hospitality, a place for storytelling and a ritual of connection. Yatreda performed the coffee ceremony live, inviting visitors to engage with Ethiopian culture firsthand. Guests received traditional Ethiopian coffee in glass cups made at TMA's hot shop, right over there somewhere, embedded with NFC chips, which when scanned, granted access to a unique digital artwork paired with a proverb. These proverbs, crafted by Yatreda and artfully presented in a digital format, spoke to their core beliefs around history, culture, technology, and nature. The residency evolved from an experimental foray in Web3 to a fully integrated museum initiative. While the first residency introduced blockchain as a tool for artistic expression, the second deepened its engagement, bridging contemporary digital practice with historical narratives, embedding interactive public engagement, and weaving the residency into the museum's broader curatorial framework. To further activate the impact, the residency expanded its public engagement, creating multiple entry points for audiences to interact with the art and artists. And artist talks, ceremonies, traditional music and dance, tours, and educational programming allowed visitors to see the continuity between the ancient and contemporary. What began as an experiment has become an evolving dialogue. How do we carry this forward, keeping the elements that have made it successful, but without losing our experimental nature? Honestly asking here, it's quite difficult. We witnessed how Web3 can function as a tool for access, storytelling, and preservation. We also learned critical lessons about how museums should engage with this technology to align with their mission and values. So, start with the art, not the technology. When used as a tool rather than the focus itself, the experience feels natural. Let audiences choose their level of engagement. Tech like Web3 can be intimidating or polarizing, and forcing it on visitors is counterproductive. Digital ownership is a mindset shift. Many visitors struggled with the abstract nature of digital assets. However, when ownership was tied to physical experiences, it became more intuitive. Educational scaffolding, whether through storytelling, guided interaction, or clear framing, was essential in helping audiences connect with the work. Web3 can be a tool for financial empowerment. Osinachi highlighted how artists use Web3 to achieve financial independence. Cultural preservation is one of Web3's strongest use cases. In a world where history is rewritten or erased, blockchain provides a way to preserve cultural heritage, historical narratives, and artistic expression. Digital ownership is about more than possession, it's about belonging to a community. Sustaining participation requires ongoing interaction, shared purpose, and long-term incentives for audiences to stay involved. Museums must define their own terms in a rapidly evolving space dominated by speculation, shifting markets, and ideological debates. Museums need to carve out a role that aligns with their mission. All right. So technology is evolving faster than ever, and understanding where tech is in its development is essential to making meaningful, well-timed investments. A wait-and-see approach can be valuable to avoid jumping into hype cycles before the technology matures. However, waiting too long can lead to irrelevance or missed opportunities. Other industries often provide useful models for technological adoption. Museums can learn from healthcare, retail, and education, where tech is already enhancing experience and efficiency. In some cases, technology is already being integrated into the artistic process, but museums lack the infrastructure to meaningfully engage with it. Recognizing gaps and opportunities allows for intentional experimentation. Our experiences with Web3 provided a foundation for structured experimentation, but the frontier also involves AR, AI, XR, and 3D printing, each with the potential to transform accessibility, engagement, preservation, and more. We've done early tests with AI for accessibility and XR for engagement, but infrastructure, guardrails, and frameworks are necessary to ensure that the further experimentation leads to meaningful, scalable programs. Okay, so I feel like the last presentation was pretty much all this, so I don't know how much I have to get into this. Did a much better job than I did with this slide. Suffice to say, yeah, AI is only as good as the data that it's trained on, and where that data is coming from, we don't have a lot of control over. So can reinforce a lot of biases. Extended reality, so VR, AR, can also blur fact and fiction when things seem very, very real, there's more weight to them and any mistakes that are present there. So especially in a museum or historical context, when we engage with something like extended reality, virtual reality, or we're recreating something that doesn't exist in a digital format, we are potentially creating biases or influence where we shouldn't. Yeah, anyway. Blockchain-based ownership is familiar to digital natives, but for museums and normal people, it creates a lot of additional complexity around ownership and so on and so forth. Anyway, so we'll kind of skip over that bit. As we navigate technologies, a structured approach to experimentation is essential. Without clear frameworks, tech initiatives become siloed, short-lived, or misaligned with values. So a thoughtful plan focuses on timely, intentional decisions that support long-term vision and organizational capacity. The most meaningful experiments build on our strengths rather than adding novelty. Part of this strategy involves understanding where technology is in its development cycle. Some, like Web3, have already passed through waves of hype and correction. Others, like AI, are evolving rapidly. Experimentation begins with small, focused initiatives that generate insight, allowing you to test and learn from real-world feedback. Efforts are refined and scaled as they show value, protecting resources, fostering learning, and genuinely enhancing the experience. Not every test succeeds, but that's part of the design. Letting go of projects that no longer serve the mission is a part of progress. We operate differently than tech. Metrics offer part of the picture, but true impact includes emotional resonance, improved accessibility, and deeper community connection, things which you can't really measure very easily. Sustainability and scalability matter. Some technologies become obsolete quickly, while others last. Responsible investment means understanding how a technology will integrate across the institution, support diverse goals, and evolve alongside needs. We should experiment boldly, but not blindly. The real challenge isn't whether to engage with emerging technologies, but how to do so in ways that reflect our values, serve our communities, and create enduring impact. Museums are more than houses of the past. They are cultural engines of society, places where meaning is shaped, values are negotiated, and futures are imagined. As technology like AI, blockchain, and immersive media reshape our world, we face a choice. Do we engage proactively, helping to build ethical, inclusive systems, or do we become bystanders as other systems form without us? The digital age challenges what we collect, who we serve, and how we define ourselves. Museums must evolve into laboratories, spaces of inquiry, experimentation, and dialogue. We are not fixed institutions, we are iterative ones, where culture is tested, refined, and reshaped. It's about anticipating how a technology will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years, and how that path might intersect with others. It's about the broader systems that shape technology's development and how these align with the systems that impact us. Museums must be cultural laboratories, spaces where we engage without fear or blind faith, embracing our role not as passive observers, but as co-authors of the futures we aspire to build. And that's it. So if you want to connect with me online, feel free. I tried to make it a little bit shorter in case anyone had questions and wanted to make it a bit more open-ended. I'm sure not everyone is very familiar with the world, so happy to answer like basic questions, or if someone wants to get into like the meat of anything or challenge anything, happy to do so with the time we have left.